thanks everybody for coming back from lunch. Strategically, we didn't have any place else for you to go to eat lunch, so it was a design tactic to make sure you stayed around, because this is an important panel. It's panel 5 if you're keeping notes and tracking your agenda. I think you'll notice it's one of the only panels that actually talks about the product or a product. So be thinking about some questions. We'll do as other panels have done, get some questions, hold questions until the end, but we'll make sure there's some room. So don't be bashful and write something down. Let me take the opportunity, and again, thank you all for seriousness staying and participating these last couple of days. I wanted to thank you all for being here, but also for the Western Governors Association for, having the event here in Bend and including me and this topic. Though the Governor Kotek is not here, she's been a great proponent of housing ever since her election to governor. Right out of the chute, she's identified the lack of housing as a crisis. She's held true to her word. She's into her second or third year of a 4-year term, and by gosh, she's still even talking about housing rather than switching to some other shiny object, so which is typically what happens in legislatures and government. So we're on course with housing, all types of housing. I might make note, don't mistake anything, I'm a Republican, the governor's a Democrat. This is a nonpartisan subject, housing, lack of for not just Oregonians, but in all the western states, if not the country. So it's an easy one to get behind. A couple of remarks that I was thinking about, if you would let me. I'm vice chair of the Senate Housing Committee in the Oregon Legislature for the Senate, and I've been now for 4 years, and we've continued to work on housing, trying to come up with areas to meet the need, what works best, what doesn't work. I've quite honestly boiled down my attention to 3 areas, and I'd like you to I'll share them with you and think about as I talk a little bit about them. But I can tell you for my next 4-year term, when I'm talking about housing and legislation, if it doesn't fit one of these areas, I'm not going to be overly interested. So I'm going to be challenging people. Those areas include land. Land for housing. Land has more land has to be available for all types of housing and development. This initially begins with expanding the UGB faster. Increasing supply of land will lower costs of land. Today we'll be discussing modular housing, which I'm in favor of, but we still have to have a place to put those units. In Oregon, for those who aren't Oregonians, let me share with you part of the dilemma here. There are 2 camps. Those who despise the thought of sprawl. The other camp is those who despise the thought of high density. So now, just from that, what we deal with when we talk about expanding our urban growth boundaries. The other area is regulations about the process. There's been much discussion in the realm around housing in Oregon. Every agency that touches housing has been tasked with something to do. Good movement has been made by the governor's office and the legislature in creating model building codes for small communities, pushing an agencies for speediness and reactiveness, and stopping frivolous lawsuits to stop UGB expansions. We need more movement here, more emergency mentality. Again, my short margin note is time is money. When this area takes way too long, longer to get a permit, than it does to actually build the unit, we're in trouble. And then finally, a lot of discussion around infrastructure, and I'm a firm believer of the need of infrastructure. I've seen it. In 2024, we made huge strides in direct allocation of over $100 million to cities to help spur development by paying for infrastructure in water and sewer for and to housing projects, so those that impacted housing projects. We also created a new strategy of a revolving loan fund for cities, so they call now where they want to use some money into housing projects. Now we are actually looking at road infrastructure in 2025. So in conclusion, I think the panel here is very excited to be here and have this opportunity to discuss with you about modular housing. Modular housing is just one of the tools in our toolbox in building homes in Oregon. I think the one thing we all agree is the only way to build more is to build everything, all types of housing, including modular housing. Again, my note, meeting demand with supply is a key here. So with that, I'm going to ask other panel members to also, if they would, kind of introduce themselves and, deliver a little sharing opportunity, if you would. And Megan, why don't you start?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Megan Yonke. I'm from the Office of Governor Polis in the state of Colorado. To channel Governor Polis, he's very much a supply advocate and very gung-ho focused on reducing regulations. So Colorado is forging ahead to encourage the growth of modular as a means of reducing housing prices, in addition to things like single stair, yes, in God's backyard, which also extends to educational institutions. We just started our legislative session, and here are some of the things that we're looking at. So all the big drivers of costs that we see on the supply delivery side. Colorado has increased our in-state modular production by 687% between 2021 and 2024, and it's now 3.7% of all the housing built in the state, up about 2% from just a couple of years ago. So how are we doing this? Under the Innovative Housing Incentive Program, or IHIP, which was passed in 2022, the state contracted with 13 housing manufacturing factories to provide up to $10.5 million in incentive grants to deliver 2,700 units at a baseline level. And in addition, the state has awarded 8 IHIP and our funding source for the state level Proposition 123, which allocates a set percentage of state budget toward housing, totaling $38 million, and those businesses are projected to produce another 4,800 units annually once the factories are at full production, plus creating 1,300 jobs in the communities where the factories are located. In 2021, Colorado imported 91% of our modular demand from out-of-state factories, and in 2024, we only imported 43%. So we're really doing a really important job of building our local supply. We're still calculating the growth of jobs in actuality, as well as our reduction in carbon. All the facilities we invested in from a state level are net zero in their production and almost carbon neutral in their manufacturing. So we're very excited about that. Based on a sample of recent modular projects, we are consistently seeing at least 6% savings in costs on a per square foot basis. This ranges wildly. We see the most savings in our rural resort areas. So Summit County, I just heard a quote that in Aspen, on-site construction is $3,000 per square foot. In modular, Habitat for Humanity is seeking to deliver $200 a square foot. So it's even more pronounced in our mountain communities and our rural areas. So we were very excited about that. We expect these benefits to increase based on Colorado doesn't have a statewide building code. However, we have gotten about 90% there with modular as a state regulated delivery mechanism. In the legislation we proposed this year, we are proposing to expand to essentially 99% of the total building, everything but on-site elements. And so what this helps to do is allow manufacturing facilities to build to inventory, not having to cater to every jurisdiction's building code, and we really hope that that will increase demand. We are also increasing the certification of general contractors on modular to try and decrease this us versus them in the general contracting space, and also increase the quality of the delivery on site. We're also expanding demand through letters of credit and low interest loans on deposits. So modular companies are having anywhere between 25 and 40% required down payment deposits, which is a really big disincentive for financial institutions. So we're looking to provide some financial incentives in that arena. And then we also are expanding beyond just modular housing to ADUs, which are now allowed statewide based on our legislation last year, and tiny homes as well. Some opportunities for modular. We have some pretty strict condo defect laws in the state of Colorado, and there's some really great research out of the Modular Building Institute as well as others that manufactured housing has far fewer instances of defects. So we're really looking to both bring down the regulations in that space and also increase modular. Growth to non-residential structures. We are starting to see our schools and other facilities trying to use modular as well, so we're trying to expand that. And then one thing that was unexpected but so exciting is the opportunity to expand our job market to disadvantaged populations. I'm thinking specifically are folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities that thrive pretty well in a manufacturing environment. So we're just excited for the job market to expand to all sorts of populations throughout our state. So those are some of the things we're doing.
That's good. Max, what do you share with us?
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, and thank you to the WGA for having me here. It's a pleasure to hear all of the wonderful presentations, and I just hats off to all the excellent progress in Oregon, which I was not aware of, but now I am, so thank you for sharing all of that. So I'm a staff scientist in the Energy Analysis and Environmental Impacts Division at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. I've been there for about 14 years. So we are one of about 17 national labs across the U.S. There are many in the western United States. There aren't any in Oregon, however. We are not to be confused with Lawrence Livermore National Lab, which is our cousin, and does the nuclear defense classified research, so we're a non-classified lab. But I personally have been doing a lot of work over the years in energy efficiency standards, electrification pathways, building modeling at the urban scale, so the capability to model large sets of buildings for energy efficiency upgrades, electrification upgrades, and resilience upgrades that I'll talk about in a moment. And at the lab, we do a lot of work in urban heat island mitigation, building modeling. There's B2B, or vehicle to building grid integration. There's a lot of demand response demonstration projects that are happening. And one of the projects that I'm currently leading is a innovative prefab modular demonstration project funded for the California Energy Commission, and it's building 3 townhomes in East Contra Costa County, which is about an hour east of San Francisco, so it's not quite coastal, pretty warm climate. And the idea is to achieve greater integration in a wall panel assembly, things like more window and door integration, and also achieve more of an assembly line automation process, and to hopefully achieve lower costs. And secondly, to demonstrate advanced resilience capabilities. So by that I mean the capability to shift down to lower power modes. So if there's a grid stress event, extreme heat wave, maybe there's a wildfire with very high winds, and you don't want to lose power, but it gives you the capability to shift to much lower power mode and just cool, just say a room or just a portion of the home as opposed to the whole home. And this type of innovation, if scaled up, could provide a lot of grid friendliness. It could just help the grid overall. So those are some of the things that I've been looking at and that we're looking at. We want to be a technical resource. We want to help hear from you and maybe share some of the findings that we're seeing in terms of our modeling. We also do some community outreach, survey work, some policy analysis. And the last thing I just wanted to say is I just wanted to echo the great need for greater resilience to the built environment. So how can we really future-proof and ensure that our building stock, both existing and new construction, is resilient to the growing threats of ever more extreme weather conditions from climate change. So that could be wildfires, that could be extreme heat, extreme cold, very massive precipitation, coastal risks, all sorts of coastal risks to speak of. So I'll just end with that.
Bob?
Thank you. Just background-wise, accountant, Pricewaterhouse, started when I was 35, SkyMall, the in-flight shopping catalog. For those of you that flew and had the weird stuff in the seat pocket, that was me. And sold that business 13 years later to Rupert Murdoch after we took it public, and it was a fun ride. And then I just started entrepreneuring, just loved that experience. I've started about 12 companies, including a biomass facility, the only one in Arizona that burns about 28 megawatts. We take 100 loads of wood chips a day in from the forest that needs to be thinned. We clear about 15,000 acres a year and make renewable energy with that. And then I was asked to serve in the legislature, so I served in the Senate in Arizona for 3 terms. Retired in 2019 and decided we have to solve this housing problem. And so, and we were just shutting down the Navajo Generating Station, the largest coal plant west of the Mississippi. So I knew that there was a lot of unemployment and a lot of pain in the community there. So we started a company called ZenniHome, and we are building volumetric, which is not panels, it's not components, it's completely finished and furnished, if you'd like, homes that can be anything from a tiny home at 320 square feet, 640 square feet, and then we have a 1,280 square foot 3-bedroom home. And the Navajo Nation fell in love with this. We took over that Navajo Generating Station and built our facility there. And we took 50% unemployment in our area and now employ almost everyone that wants a job. So we're excited about that. We'll be at about 250 jobs at the end of this year. So ZenniHome is creating an opportunity to have steel fabricated, non-combustible exterior surfaces on the home and build everything in the factory and do absolutely as much as possible, including becoming a VPP for DOE purposes, a virtual power plant, where we would have solar on the roof in the factory, lithium-ion batteries, electric car vehicle charging, et cetera, where the car can charge back to the house and go bi-directional. And so just a little bit about the company real quick, if this will work. Am I pushing the wrong button? Oh, I'm sorry.
Green button, the one.
Okay.
There you go.
Need to go forward. Thank you. So our mission is to produce the highest quality, attainable housing globally that is factory built, enhanced tech, sustainable, stackable, and transportable. So our products can be dropped as a single family home, and they can also be a duplex, 4-plex, 8-plex, and then you'll see a 90-plex. We're the densest project in Arizona today, 90 homes on a half acre, over podium, grocery store on the ground floor, and that's, we also do LIHTC as well. So think of anything less than 5 stories we can do. The modules will come finished, they'll be craned into position, and it's just a matter of wrapping up mate lines, corridors, and elevators and stairs and things like that on site. We are building these like we've hired the person that opened the Gigafactory in Austin, Texas for Elon Musk, Dr. Michael Schmidt. And we are going to build these homes with automation similar to automobile manufacturing. To do that, we've stayed with an 8-foot wide by 40-foot module that's kind of the size of a bus. And everything that we do delivers that with no overweight, no over height, no over width shipments. They can go anywhere. They can go on trains. They can go on ships anywhere in the world. So we're staying with that modular size. You can see these being built in this picture as well. So they're factory built, steel, and finished and furnished. And then we're all about sustainability. They're all electric. California wants all electric. They're all electric, no gas. We also have a gray and black water recycling system we can put with the home that recycles 98% of the water to potable standards. Technology out of Germany. So we're really excited, very sustainable. We think it's perfect. We're being called about California's fires. We're being asked to help in North Carolina with the hurricane. They have 128,000 homes that were lost or damaged in that hurricane in North Carolina, and now however many we end up with in California. So happy to take any questions later.
Margaret?
Hi, everyone. Margaret Van Vliet. My consultancy is Trillium Advisors, and through that firm, I advise local governments and nonprofits, primarily up and down the West Coast, on various housing strategies. Unlike my neighbor here, I've been in the same industry, the housing industry, primarily the affordable housing industry, for a few decades. I won't say more about that. But held a number of positions in the public sector, but actually started my career in the private sector in banking. So I've been around the housing world for a long time. I have become, in the last 5 years since I've left the public sector, really captivated by the potential that is offered by modular housing. And I'm really excited to be here, appreciate the opportunity to hear from these very smart panelists to my right about kind of where innovation is happening. I think a couple things I would call out. If this moment in time with the wildfires that we're seeing in LA, I lived through the wildfires in Sonoma County in 2017. We lived through horrific fires here in Oregon 4 years ago. Like if we can't understand the urgency around innovation now, I'm not sure what we're doing. We really have to be able to produce homes in new and different ways. Yes, to save cost, yes, to save time, but also just frankly to get, address the severity of our kind of collective and community-based housing shortages. So I'm becoming an evangelist for this business. And again, doing advisory services, not actually a developer. Although maybe I'll take a page out of your book and try being an entrepreneur. I don't know. The other thing I wanted to offer for the conversation today is the potential for use of mass timber in the housing space generally, but very specifically for this conversation in the modular space. Mass timber is more frequently used in high-rises and mid-rises, in industrial buildings and commercial buildings. It's not used, it's hardly used at all in modular, either in a sort of the flat pack panels or volumetric. And I think we have the opportunity, and there is work happening in Oregon and Washington in particular, to try and advance that. And part of the reason I'm so captivated by this is it's really it's a holistic solution if done well, right? If we can harvest timber from forests in a way that is sustainable, not cutting down all the big trees, but to do forest restoration and bring some health back to our forest by selective thinning, that provides a fiber supply. That has benefits that I don't need to tell folks in this room. And by the way, many of those forests are adjacent to our rural communities that were decimated by the changes in the forest products industry decades ago. And so the opportunity to provide jobs and restart some mills that have been closing for decades is really an important kind of policy objective that we could potentially achieve as well. And then as we need to be able to scale up the use, we need to train architects and engineers in how it can be applied, how it can be deployed. We have a couple of wonderful examples in Oregon. My friend Nathan over here, Nathan Young, runs a modular company, and he's experimenting with mass timber in his ceiling and floor systems in a way that's really promising. So I just want to introduce this idea that mass timber can and should be part of the solution, and I'm very much in Senator Anderson's camp. We got to do it all. Like, we're not going to put traditional home builders out of business. We need them all, And so let's do it, and to the extent we can buy some sustainability, some energy efficiency, some forest restoration, all these things along the way, that feels very compelling. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, and thank you all three. One of the common themes that I think I'll use, if you don't mind, is the first soft question that we can respond is the whole idea of why modular housing. You know, there's a shortage going on. In Oregon, the legislature recently invested $20 million into 4 operations, modular operations, with the challenge of expanding production. It's kind of a experiment. So as someone who likes to try innovation and willing to gamble a bit, could each of you perhaps talk a little more of, why modular? What should I be expecting from my investment of $20 million?
So I think what is fascinating in the Denver context, I don't know, has anybody been to Denver? How many folks? Just driving around, some of the biggest NIMBY pushback we get in the city is that we are getting rid of Craftsman homes and putting in place more density. One of the best talking points that I have is that the Craftsman home came out of a catalog from Sears and was in fact a modular product of sorts. And so we are essentially trying to, again, solve our housing crisis with what is a very high-quality product. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is differentiating a mobile home, which is a manufactured home, from a modular home, which could be anything. And this is a talking point that we hear and have to dispel all the time in the legislation, and something to take a look at is because of this misunderstanding, we have a lot of municipalities that zone out modular specifically. And so our legislation is actually requiring that anywhere that a structure is allowed, it's allowed to be on-site constructed or modular. You cannot distinguish between the two. And so we can build modular to the same design standards, to the same density requirements as an on-site build. So I think just changing the dialogue in this realm helps out quite a bit.
Yeah, I would echo many of those remarks from Megan, and just add a few more. So I think modular has the potential to address some of the large labor gaps. I think that people have mentioned, I forget, but it has come up a few times before across the trades or in ceilings or attics, for example. Also, modular has the potential to provide much greater speed of deployment in terms of actual physical time to construct something on site. And in terms of scaling, the title of our talk, if you just go back to Bob's slide and think about a factory is a entity which kind of intrinsically offers scale. I mean, you can build a bigger factory. You can. I worked at Intel for many years, where a lot of the engineering was on how to improve the factories for production, for yield, for speed, for output, for cost per unit, for performance. All those things can be brought to bear. Automation, technology from the automotive, but also under other industries, the aviation industry, anything that is being manufactured at volume. I just wanted to mention that modular construction is not new, as I think someone mentioned. We did it after World War II, Craftsman homes as well. In Sweden, it's, I think, over 40% of the new home construction. In Japan, I think it's 100%. So we can learn from Sweden and Japan. They have done, obviously they're not, exactly the same as the US for many different reasons, but it's not something which is a wild pie in the sky concept at all. So I'll return back to that theme. I just wanted to mention one thing that I forgot in my opening remarks, just 30 seconds, which is that for the new California Energy Commission prefab modular demonstration project, which has been funded, actually, several $1 million project, we are looking for an additional prefab modular vendor or producer. So he may be sitting right next to me.
Pick me.
If you're interested, then please feel free to just contact me after the panel. Thanks. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
No, it's great.
I think one of the things, if you've not come from this industry, that we don't understand is that HUD homes, manufactured, the old trailer court, kind of product, those are under a federal 1978 HUD code, and those do not stack. Their quality is sometimes much lower. And what we're talking about here today is International Building Code, International Residential Code, the same thing, the same standard the city requires, all of your cities require for a stick-built home. We have to meet those standards in our factory. And when it comes to the job site, it gets inspected again to make sure that it's meeting those specifications. So we have to change the vernacular, and sometimes I think our industry gets cast into the same Modular Home, Clayton Homes, Champion Homes, Cavco. We are not that. They're a great rural product. They help a lot in those areas, but they acknowledge, and I'm the friends with CEOs of some of those companies, they go, we don't have an urban product. We don't have an urban product. We don't have anything that would stack, to a multifamily standard. And what's exciting is the front page of the Wall Street Journal in December had the largest apartment developer in the country, Greystar, announce that they just opened a factory in Knox, Pennsylvania, and their first project they built was 90% less waste, 60% faster, and they saved 10% cost. And every company is now calling us, that's their competitor, saying, can we talk? Because that's going to be how we build multifamily in the future. It's going to be done in factories, folks. You're going to build Lego blocks, Lego building blocks that are completely finished in a factory. I'm actually today building a project for Mesa, Arizona. They haven't even started the civil work to put piers in the ground. And I'm tiling, putting toilets in rooms. I have 35 units of the 90 already built and finished. So think about doing toilets and tile work before you even turn the spade on dirt. That's what you get with modular. So it's really worth thinking about to speed it up, bring costs down, and it's massively powerful. I think Greystar quoted in the article that they have 624 typical dumpsters full of waste on a 300-unit apartment. They had 60. They had 60 on this job. So it went down 90%, the waste that normally occurs on a job site. So it's all good.
We've heard a lot of compelling arguments for why modular. I think, so I agree with everything, obviously, my colleagues have said. One thing I'd add is working conditions. I think it's safe to say in kind of harsh environments, the construction season if it's happening year-round, it's not always safe, it's not always easy for workers. And so bringing workers along into advanced manufacturing jobs can pay a lot of dividends. Colorado's obviously doing some innovation there with folks with IDD, but I think the working conditions is one additional factor. I would also note to Max's point about Sweden and Japan, lots of European countries are in fact using mass timber as well. So in that regard, they're ahead of us, and I'm part of a team that's studying some of what's happening in that regard as well. And I will stop there because.
That's good. And thank you. Those are nice lists. I'm checking off my box to make sure I monitor that for our own pilots, so thank you.
Absolutely.
None of you talked about end cost. We get ideas. We took a tour yesterday. We got different prices per unit, similar in the affordable government range. We're talking about more supply, and I would like us to talk about putting a lid on the cost of the product. So is this stuff, modular, going to contribute to dropping the price, or at least holding the line on cost? Give me a sense of relief rather than a spiraling cost per square footage.
Yeah, I said this in my opening remarks, but just to drive it home is that in a pilot that we had with LIHTC projects, so the average per unit construction cost in Colorado is $483,000 a unit. And obviously that fluctuates pretty broadly. With recent tax credit rounds, we saw consistently 6% savings. And that is with a much more high-quality product. It is all the benefits that we've discussed today versus stick construction, which is not necessarily net zero. I gave the example of a $3,000 a unit versus a $200 a unit cost up in the mountains. So it has the potential to be pretty significant.
Everybody agree with that? You've seen that kind of?
I'll just give you our numbers. Our numbers are around $150,000 per unit. Between a studio and a 3-bedroom unit, about $150,000 out the factory door. It's about $100,000 to $110,000 for what they call BOW, balance of work on site, that's civil work. That's buttoning everything up and getting people heads in beds. And so if you can build anywhere in the country for $250,000, $260,000 a door, we're competitive with anything stick-built. And could save a ton of money. For example, in California, that would be half the cost. I'm sure in Colorado it would be similar. So you might have some markets like Texas that are pretty cost-effective with stick-built that will be beating them, but not by that much. And then again, think 50% faster with a significantly knowable number upfront, sign a contract, that's going to be your cost. And that's hard to do on a site-built project.
Yeah, and I would just drive home that the time provides its own cost savings in terms of construction financing. We may or may not want to introduce the ideas of, where are their financing gaps and what could the public sector do about that? But I think, yeah, to the extent I've studied it, I'm obviously not a developer, but yeah, it's very consistent that that cost savings are material, but that only can happen once you're at scale. Like onesie twosie experiments, probably not so much. 20-unit pilot, maybe about par. But if a factory can get to scale with automation and has a consistent pipeline of demand, then we're in a different ballgame.
Good. Perfect. Max, anything you don't need to, but
For the cost specifically?
yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think I have
Okay.
anything to add. Yeah,
That-
just add to one thing that was said earlier about the mass timber. One additional advantage is that, you can regrow the trees, provided our climate will allow that, so that it can be a more circular, more sustainable overall system. So that's
Right.
Another plus. And Oregon, has a good
Knows how to grow trees over.
resource.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And Bob, thank you for adding the site prep requirements. I think that's usually those in the room who are saying, oh yeah, 150 square, however, and you've got them. So thank you for including that. Now, you've raised a concern, as you heard in my remarks, around regulations. Why does a permit process take longer than it does to build the units? And Bob, you're speeding up the unit, so you're really shining a light on that regulation process. Is there anything that's going on in your worlds to streamline existing, what we've done forever, process of getting a unit ready to be sticks in the air, or however?
Can I share first?
Please.
Oregon, you need some legislation. We want to come here, but we can't come here because Oregon law requires that your inspectors be in our factory.
Ah, yes.
That's a simple thing. Every other state's just fine with a third-party inspector like Intertech or other companies that do that for other states to come and do inspections, and you honor their inspections. They have to be there all the time in our factory, checking every station, making sure you're following procedures, making sure the electrical and plumbing is correct. And Oregon says, no, we got to send our inspectors. So essentially, you're creating a situation, I hope Colorado's not doing that as well, by saying you have to be in-state to be able to sell here. I hope
You
not.
can come to Colorado, we use third parties.
Great.
Yeah.
So Oregon's just one of the states that's a little bit more problematic. Utah, for example, was the worst in the country, and we have an office there. So last year, we met with the governor, Governor Cox, who is very in favor of this now. And we met with the Senate President, the Speaker, and we said, we've got to change this. So we introduced a model bill in modular building in Utah who had nothing. So we had to work with 250 cities, towns, and counties to be able to do business in Utah. It went through last January. We had 1 dissenting vote in the Senate, 2 dissenting votes in the House, and the governor signed it 45 days later. It went through like nothing. And now Utah has the #1 best modular code in the country. They went from 50th to #1. But it took some work that we do, right, Dick?
Yep.
You have to do some legislation sometimes to fix things that were maybe done in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and that has to be fixed. And I think that a lot of HOAs have bans on anything modular. They think they're manufactured or trailer homes, and they're in the CC&Rs, they're all over the place. That has to be probably at the state level banned and removed from those HOA requirements. So there's a lot to be done to make this easier.
Yeah. Thank you. Why don't we switch to that, as you've brought up, I think the
Can I
image.
just-
Oh,
sorry,
sure,
sorry,
Max, go ahead.
Dick, I
Let's
just
finish
add-
that.
Just to add to what Bob, you just mentioned, I think with that great progress in Utah and some of the needs, I mean, those probably are not exhaustive, but some of the needs to do business really in different states across the West, I think that could be an opportunity for the WGA
Yeah.
to
Yes.
develop, to coordinate, to cooperate, to build initiatives so that those hurdles, those barriers can be overcome in a way that makes sense and that can really kind of create the market, so to speak.
I
So the
agree.
market is sort of the patchwork
Yeah.
today, and you can't really, so I think that's a real opportunity, I think.
Agree.
I don't want to make excuses for, Oregon and Washington, but, we have Boeing, and so based on Boeing's experience, it's better that they have the quality control folks federal. Evidently, Boeing couldn't handle it. So Bob, don't make it hard on us by your people not staying up to speed with the quality control, please. We'll try to keep the state inspectors out of there, so.
Great.
All right, but there is history. You raised points about the image, whether it's around quality, HOAs, zoning, all the kind of things, negative, what generally until people don't, they need to be educated, see. I don't know if that's consistency of regulations, state, local, state, national. Does that exist today? Should it exist today? Could you just, what you felt and learned, Megan, you did a little about the imagery, the not in my backyard kind of stuff, and now, I guess part of me also says, is this product limited to rural and coastal? Because we don't, in those areas, don't have the workforce, we don't have the contractors, we don't have the supply lines, and we just always be, this is a rural product or coastal product.
Megan, do you have an opinion?
Yeah, sure. This is really acute for us right now because, like I kind of mentioned, we have standard building codes for about 90% of the modular process, and we don't have them for plumbing, electrical, and fire suppression. We have run into a couple of barriers in trying to go all in. First of all, we're a big local control state, so it is really challenging. But we are on the cusp of getting our city and counties to neutral on the bill with a couple of really key provisions. We're not sure how we're going to handle HOAs yet, but we're still working through that. We had a bill last year that prohibits HOAs from banning sustainability elements, and we might go that route to be like, this is a more sustainable product, therefore you don't have the ability to say no to this product. I think just generally, people seeing it in their community, knowing that they can't tell the difference, and just sharing a couple of pictures from within someone's community of this really great high-quality product that meets all their design criteria, but was able to just be delivered through a different mechanism.
Oh, sorry, yeah, just add to that, and then maybe Bob can go. So in terms of the perceptions, as part of our project, we're planning to do one of our partners is Habitat for Humanity. We're planning to do a statewide survey to assess kind of attitudes and maybe to have an opportunity to do some education. In addition, we're planning to produce some educational materials for that project that maybe we could disseminate more broadly or put online, certainly. But I think this question of educational materials and misunderstandings or apprehensions or misapprehensions, I think it carries over from yesterday's discussion, because I think people from Oregon were mentioning that the missing middle, alternative forms of housing, can sometimes be very hard to convey. Like, what are you talking about exactly? And similarly, alternative home technologies, I think, are an opportunity because people don't know that they're alternative home technologies. But I'm just thinking, it just occurred to me that maybe it's an opportunity to flip the narrative. Today, maybe they're looked upon as, less desirable, but if we can somehow transform that to say, hey, this is high tech, this could be more desirable, this could be more of a status symbol like the Priuses or whatever. Sorry, don't mean to bash at all, but you know what I mean. Hopefully this is more sustainable. That might be an opportunity, but I think, again, it could be an opportunity for some greater coordination so that every state, all 20 states or 19 states, are not producing their own materials, but maybe they can each pitch in 5% and you have a lot of good things to share. So just some ideas.
Good.
Yeah, it is a perception problem, and it comes from things that came out of the factory under HUD code, often were awful quality. In fact, in the southeast where there's hurricanes, the factories the owners I talked to, they said we actually make less structural walls. There's thinner veneers and everything in the southeast because we're trying to get a product that people can afford. Well, now think about a hurricane coming through. So a tornado or hurricane always wipes out the trailer courts first, right? And so there's an impression that leaves with the public that this is not safe. A product that's made in a factory is lower quality and cheaper in materials, and that's just not the case. We can't get an international residential code inspector to stamp this if it wasn't of the same quality that a residential. So I love what Elon Musk did with electric cars. People thought, electric cars are going to be like golf carts, right? But what did he do? He made them faster, more sleek than ICE, internal combustion engines. And all of a sudden, electric cars actually had a higher perception. But that's going to be a lot of work that we're going to have to change the paradigm, that this is not a trailer court model from 1978, type of thing. It's just an old thing we've got to overcome.
Yeah.
I want to say a word in favor of manufactured housing, because it is a really important part of the housing stock. And yes, the HUD code originated 78. It's been updated. And manufactured housing today is built to much higher standards than those than the old trailers. And so I'm actually doing some work with some manufactured housing providers in Oregon, and they're really eager to help overcome that stigma and have joined forces on a bill in the legislature that I think Senator Anderson may have put his name to, that would in fact advance both kinds of off-site construction, manufactured and modular. And so we want to be careful from, that we make all the products available for high quality, healthy living in all communities. To your point, Senator, about are the coastal or more rural parts of Oregon going to be stuck with the kind of the lesser quality? Not at all. In fact, I'm aware again of Mods PDX has a project that will bring 27 units to John Day, middle of this year. They're modular. And so once you get that size right and you can truck them or freight train them or, whatever, they can go lots of places. And so that's one of the reasons I'm really excited, because you don't have to have the local labor force. Yeah. So.
And Bob, you raised a good point, and we all did, on the standards. I hate to keep bringing back Oregon concerns, or what I perceive to be Oregon concerns. As Margaret indicated, we went through fires in 2020. Finally, when some housing stock came to Southern Oregon, I don't know if they were manufactured or modular
They were
or
modular.
whatever, made in Idaho, but not of quality, after we waited so long, and with mold, and had to, couldn't use them. So we've still, we paid for them, had all these people waiting. So I'm back to that regulatory piece, the quality control, the concern the public has, first knowing they don't know.
Yeah.
And so I would hope part of the education would be just to decipher the differences or the requirements, or somehow the consumer could know there's a difference between an RV manufactured, modular, how does it compare to stick-built, kind of thing, type of stuff. Because we do have bad experiences, and they're always something.
We always have, after these fires, there's going to be a real push to replace something more resilient. And because we have to meet a tier 2 fire code to go 5 stories over podium, that means we have fire sprinklers built in the factory. It means that there can't be any combustible material in the unit. So we're doing a cementitious flooring material. The siding is non-flammable, color-fast, cementitious material. The studs are 2x6 zinc-coated studs, 16 gauge, very stout. And so as a result, you've got a fireproof multifamily tower that could be dorms at a college or whatever, and then you take that down and just make it a home, and it's already perfect to come into an after-fire resilience program that the stock we replace, let's make it more fire resistant. And so I think we can do that in factories. We can do it better, faster, and more consistently in a factory than asking all the GCs in the world that are stick building homes to meet this new code because of fire. You want to be more fireproof.
Yeah, one thing that I'll say on this too is there's a reason why we went so far as to do everything but plumbing, electrical, and fire suppression. Just in these latter years, we have found that since we're starting to go down this route, we're having to fight against unionized labor pretty significantly to make those changes. And so it is a constant battle to prove that we are still taking licensed professionals in the construction of these homes, but they may not be, on paper, the same designation, and that there is an intent to have cost savings in the process. And so I think that this conversation about quality, what's enough, what's too much, it's very acute for us in Colorado, and a reason why we haven't had this big bulk of cost savings until this fight.
Interesting. Those project labor agreements, is that what the unions?
Yeah.
I've heard that
Our
recently from-
state boards.
I think our governor kind of pushed something lately on that, but thanks, Matt. Margaret.
Yep.
Finance. I think Megan talked about difficulty of financing this product.
So there's a couple things right off the bat that probably are worth mentioning in this forum. One is, and Bob's overcome the construction financing problem. But typically, home builder gets a construction loan. The bank understands how draws are going to work and the basic cadence and how that's all going to work. Well, if you don't have a 12-month construction schedule, that's a different kind of animal. And what I've come to learn is that sort of regulated banks don't really understand this product and why you might need draws up front, or you might need a different kind of way of dispersing over time. So I want to follow up with Megan after today to learn about how is it that the public sector could mitigate that risk in a way to jumpstart the access to capital. So I think that's one dimension that is worth mentioning. I think this stigma piece relates to it, right? Like lenders, appraisers, if you want to get conventional financing or equity investors, they have to understand the product and they have to have confidence in the product and the producer and the ability to market the unit. So there's these pockets of risk that are a little bit different than traditional capital sources might be used to. And so it's about sort of how do you de-risk it just enough, not to have the public sector pay the whole thing, but de-risk it enough so that frees up private capital.
Just to jump in there, we are looking at using our low-interest loan capacity through Proposition 123, about $5 million, to provide revolving loans to the project for deposit coverage, that upon delivery of the product on site or some milestone we haven't confirmed yet, inspection, like get inspection from the state, the medallion, that would be taken out by the construction lender. And it's very popular, even with $5 million to cover a pretty substantial amount of the need, because those get repaid every 3 months, essentially, as things are delivered on site. So it's very quick to revolve. We will make money as a state off of this product, in addition to having the benefits of bringing more traditional financiers to the table.
Yes.
Colorado is leading the way. You know, there's no discussions going on in Arizona or Utah to do that. It is a beast that has to be solved. Remember, this is 3% of the market in America. Lenders are doing 97%, and they know that they can issue a draw, and there'll be bunks of lumber and plywood on the job site, and that's their collateral. And when I start a project, those bunks of materials are in my factory, and the banks aren't comfortable with that. And so you're kind of paying a down payment, a deposit, and where's your collateral? You're really nervous about this from a banking perspective. So we have not solved it. Mm-hmm. There has to be a new kind of banking mentality to help us do this, to really get it off the ground in a big way. There has to be at least some banks in the West that know how to do this. And you can knock on the door and say, okay, we've got another modular apartment ready to go. And they understand that a deposit needs to be made for the factory to get going. And it's not going to be bunks of lumber and steel and everything at a job site. It's actually at a factory somewhere.
The one thing, I'm sorry.
I'm just wondering about that. Neither of anybody's talked about the site. Is that a separate loan, or who preps the site? Who pays for prepping the site ready to take on?
That could still be a construction loan,
Keep it
right?
in the
Like
savings.
if
How
the
to do that.
developer's going to do the normal thing, they're just, instead of hiring a general contractor to do it all, they can hire a general contractor to do site prep, right? And then they buy the units from the factory, and then there's more work to be done, siting and utility hookups and all the things once the units are delivered.
Gotcha. Okay.
I was going to say, this is very acute, though, because we had a high-profile manufacturer in Colorado go out of business. And one of the concerns that financiers had was that they were taking deposits from the project they were paying for and using it for general lines of credit. And so there has been a lot of discussion about how to target our loan versus doing a line of credit. There are a lot of opinions about the validity of both, but targeting it toward each individual project such that we for sure have a deed of trust on the property and some kind of a collateral, versus putting it into a letter of credit and then our collateral is on the factory itself. So there are some like really serious concerns about cross-subsidizing projects that we have to deal with our financiers.
Why don't we take now a good stopping spot to take some questions from the audience. We'll come once, if there aren't any questions. I've got one last that we'll have the panelists think about. But how about a question, anything about this product you've been dying to ask, wonder about, what's your favorite color? Does anybody live in a modular product? Okay.
Do not live in one. I might be in one of those Sears and Roebuck
Yeah.
craftsman homes. I think maybe this is more for Margaret. I mean, I'm fascinated and have been a believer, but has anyone done a study in Oregon of what all the barriers are? So, I mean, I've heard of lots of things that maybe, and I appreciate you, Senator Anderson, saying we've got a checklist of things we got to figure out what are the barriers in Oregon, but Margaret,
Yeah,
have
there
you been
have-
involved? Is there a report
There-
that
there
shows what
are,
are the
but
barriers? Do we
they're-
need legislation to make sure HOAs can't ban them?
So the quick answer is no. There have been a couple of studies that I'm aware of that Echo Northwest did that scanned the horizon, scanned other places. We just don't have enough experience in Oregon. We're trying to take best advantage of who's already studied this, that, and the other. And there is a piece of that in this bill that is the incentivizing factory-built homes. There is a provision for some money specifically to study the impacts of these pilots that are proposed, and really dissect these barriers, the experience, how it goes on the site, and so forth. So it's a great question, Brian.
Other question? Oh, got one.
This may be a Bob and Max question or everybody, but Modular's working to overcome not having that rural labor force. What happens when y'all are sending a product out into an area that has no one out there in terms of MEPs and set crew? Are y'all shipping out set crew and MEPs, all your trades? How is that working in those situations?
Yeah, on the Navajo Nation, for example, we're doing 160 homes, and we're providing a crew that would travel and do the foundations and all of that before the units show up. So that's a possibility. I was just talking to the largest mine in Arizona, Cypress Baghdad mine, and they needed 1,000 workers, workforce housing, and 1,000 workers to build a new concentrator for the copper mill, the copper mine there. And they just couldn't get workforce there. So what they're doing is they're going into Phoenix and starting a modular factory to build the concentrator, which is the largest one in the world, in pieces where there is labor, and taking the module pieces out to the mine. So just think about that mentality. That's what we're doing. We're basically taking a labor shortage problem and solving it by putting it in a factory, and then the work that gets done in the mine, for example, is still some, but they figure it's about 20% of the work that they would have to do if they did it from scratch in the mine. So that's the idea. Shift a little bit where the labor is from factory, from job site to factory, but you still have to have about 20% of the work done in the field. And if you don't have labor there, you're going to have to bring in some MEP certified folks to do the utility hookups. By the way, we do siding in the factory. So most of the modular guys don't.
Right.
And so you have to reskin the whole building and get up on scaffolding and put up stucco or whatever you're going to do on the outside. We ship with siding on.
Maybe I'll just add just a few points, but not necessarily answering your question directly. So in terms of the labor impact, one comment is that construction is traditionally a male-dominated industry. I think it's 85% in the U.S. So with modular home construction, which is predominantly off-site, that has the potential to bring more women into the construction industry. So in Sweden, for example, I don't recall the exact numbers, I think it's like 40 to 45% of the workforce, at least at a few companies. I don't know if it's the whole industry, but a few companies is women. So there's a difference there. And then in terms of the skills and upskilling or reskilling, it's a question of is it training up or reskilling, training anew. So I think that's a subject of a few studies, and for sure there's the need for some training, both primarily off-site in the factory, but also on-site as well. So for example, we're having to do some training with Habitat to, erect some of these structures on-site.
Our number one welder is a woman, and she prefers a crew of women under her. So it's amazing to watch that crew, and they're very comfortable and do a great job.
Well, let's finish with just a speed, not speed dating, but speed answering for a change. One word, one sentence, short sentence, strategy to get to scale. What is key for this product to get to scale?
One thing we haven't talked about is the role of our priorities at the state level. So our QAP, our funding for gap financing, we are one step away from requiring modular in those instances to kind of lead the market.
Yeah, I'd just say that it seems like we do have a fractured set of standards and rules and maybe financing. I don't know if the banks are regional or not, but I think we really need to drive towards one big market. So that might be some standards consolidation or more model codes, more comprehensive codes across climate zones, for example, and also to solve or just at least address or mitigate the financing challenges. So if we can do that, then I think companies like Zenni will have a bigger market to address, and it will be easier to draw in investors. And then if there's one market, then they'll draw more entrants into the arena, and then that will drive competition and lower costs. And so those are all the directions we want to head.
Regulations. It's really daunting to look at every state being a little different, even if they've got a Department of Housing at the state level. And there's a big idea is to consider taking the HUD standard and actually putting next to it federally a modular standard, and actually have an IRC IBC at the federal level that stands by the HUD code, but doesn't replace it. And we would have a federal program that all the states would have to adopt. I think that's a great idea, but it's going to take a lot of lifting, heavy lifting.
Time is of the essence. We're going to have to take some risks because the risk of the status quo isn't pretty. And so that's my closing word.
Great. Well, thank you all. Thanks for coming together. Thanks for traveling. Hopefully the audience appreciated your discussion. I did. I made notes. So thank you.